The President, please be seated. The court is now in session. As the Chamber already informed the public and the parties to the proceeding that during today's sessions we continue hearing witness Hun Chun-Lee questions to be put by counsel for Mr. Ieng Sari, and we would continue hearing TCW 307 after the conclusion of the first witness. Mr. Dipari, you are now invited to report to the Chamber the current status of the parties to the proceedings. The Grefshade. Good morning, Mr. President and Your Honors. All parties to the proceedings are present except Mr. Ieng Sari, who is present but in his holding cell due to his health concerns. Mr. Hun Chun-Lee is now in the courtroom. The following witness, TCW 307, is ready to be called. According to the witness said that the witness has no connection to any of the parties to the proceedings, including the civil parties. The witness already took an oath this morning. Counsel Mom Rutia is the duty counsel assigned for the witness, and the witness, again, Mr. President, Your Honors, is ready and waiting at the holding room. The President. Thank you, Mr. Dipari. Before we proceed to counsel for Mr. Ieng Sari to put questions to the witness, the Chamber would like to hand over to Judge Silva Cartwright to rule on the submission submitted by counsel for Mr. Ieng Sari. Judge Cartwright, you may now proceed.
Thank you, President. The Trial Chamber has deliberated on the Ieng Sari defence request for an oral hearing to make submissions on the permissibility of audio recording the accused and his treating physician in the holding cell. The Chamber considers an oral hearing is not required, as it has requested written submissions citing appropriate legal authorities on this issue. The Chamber also notes that the pre-trial Chamber decision of 11 June 2010 does not appear to provide guidance regarding the specific practices at issue here. Therefore, the Trial Chamber reiterates the Ieng Sari defence must seek leave to resume the audio recording of the accused pursuant to Internal Rule 92, and the request for oral hearing is denied. That's the end of the Trial Chamber's ruling, President. Thank you.
The President, I thank you, Judge Silva Cartwright. We would like now to hand over to counsel for Mr. Ieng Sari to put questions to witness Chun-Lee.
Good morning, Mr. President. Good morning, Your Honors, and good morning to everyone in and around the courtroom. And before I begin my questioning, in light of the decision, we do seek leave at this point to audio tape and record what transpires down there between our client and our case manager and when the doctors communicate, for the following reason. By the time we make these submissions in writing, the prosecution responds, you enter a decision, 2 or 3 weeks would have gone by. We submit that making audio recordings would not prejudice anyone. Certainly, if the trial chamber were to decide down the road that such recordings were impermissible, they certainly could destroy the tape recordings. But the ruling itself, as it is, prevents the defense from making an adequate record. I don't wish to take a whole lot of time. I just want to make sure that my record is very, very clear. We find that your decision by way of email to us, citing no authority, and the decision today can and does have a chilling effect for future purposes. I don't want to go into the entire argument, but in any event, we are seeking leave, and we would also give assurances to the trial chamber that those tapes would not be in any way shared to the public, and in fact, we are willing to provide the tapes to the trial chamber at the end of each day. Therefore, I think this is a rather reasonable measure to take. It doesn't prejudice anyone. It assures us of a record, and it allows you, Your Honors, to then destroy such tape recordings if in the event you find it is in the interest of justice not to have something rather transparent, verifiable, objective that may support the defense's position at some point that our client is not able to follow the proceedings and therefore cannot and is not and will not be enjoying all of his fair trial rights. Thank you.
The President, the International Court Prosecutor, you may now proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President, and we'll be brief in the interests of getting on with the hearing of witnesses' testimony. We submitted a preliminary response to one of Mr. Yingsari's requests last night and gave some preliminary submissions on this issue without going into the law. We're of the view that the recent recording of the conversations with doctors in particular exceed the limited authorization that was in place pursuant to a pretrial chamber decision. Having said that, there is a decision, there is an order now by the trial chamber for all recordings to cease. That order is, of course, in force and to be observed by all parties. As to our learned friend's interim application for recording, we leave that in your Honour's capable hands. We take no position on it. We note our learned friend has undertaken to submit the tapes to be in the custody of the chamber and to be dealt with by the chamber as you see fit and as you decide ultimately on the application. Thank you.
The President, the Chamber has already ruled upon this, and we wish not to reconsider it. We will wait until things will be arranged and settled by parties according to the memorandum of the trial chamber. Without further ado, we would like now to hand over to counsel for Mr. Yingsari to proceed with their line of questionings to this witness.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Your Honors, for your prompt denial of our request. Sir, my name is Michael Carnavas. I'm here with Mr. Angodom, and we represent Mr. Yingsari. Good morning. I would like to begin by going back to your qualifications. let me begin by asking you, when did you complete and graduate from medical school?
Response. I graduated from medical school in Phnom Penh in 1967 after had been in the practicum sessions for 20 months at the Kalmat Hospital. During that time, I was also assigned to practice my medical profession at Battambang province from 1967 until 1973. By mid of 1973, I was asked to join the army, working as the military doctor at Battambang until 75.
Thank you. We're going to go step by step. How many years did you actually go to medical school? And did you actually complete your medical studies?
Response. It took me more than 7 years to finish my medical studies.
Thank you. And what specialty did you have, if any?
Response. I am a general physician.
The reason I'm asking these questions, sir, is when you testified, you told us that having been a doctor from 67 to 73 in the civilian hospital, you were then transferred to the medical hospital, the military hospital, where you were a medic, not a physician, not a doctor, but a medic. Do you recall giving us this evidence?
Response. I remain a general physician all along.
So when you testified last week that you were merely a medic and not a doctor at the military hospital from 73 to 75, were you misspeaking?
The President, Mr. Witness, could you please hold on? Co-prosecutor, you may now proceed.
Your Honours, I'm reluctant to interject early, but it may well be an issue of translation, and the best way to resolve it is by reading to the doctor the relevant passage so that it can be read to him in Khmer, and he can understand the exact words that were used by him, and we can understand the words that were interpreted, so that we understand exactly what was said, and then we can resolve if there are any inconsistencies in the accounts. Thank you.
Mr. President, I appreciate the guidance from the prosecutor, but I would like to go step by step. The gentleman was able to write a book after 25 years with great detail, without any notes. Surely his memory is good enough that he would remember what he said last Friday or last Thursday. And I would like to ask him, did he ever testify last week that he was a medic in the military hospital?
Response. I was a doctor at the civilian hospital, and I remain somehow a doctor at the military hospital because I still practice my profession as a physician there.
All right. Well, let me just quote here from September 7th. That would be Friday, Your Honors. And this is on page 37. So I'm reading from the English because this is what I have to rely on. I don't know what was said in Khmer. It says here on line 4, I became a physician in 1967, and with the permission of the government, I was assigned to work in a civilian hospital in Battambang. Question: until when did you leave Battambang? I had worked at Battambang Hospital until 1973, mid-1973. And in 1973, I was asked to join the Army and worked as a military medic in hospital for, something is inaudible, from 1973 until 1975. Do you recall being asked these questions and giving these answers, sir?
Response: I believe that the interpreting itself could be slightly different from what I was saying. Even though I worked at the military hospital, I still maintain my position as a doctor.
Right. Well, it would seem that the day before, on December 6th, 2012, you said something similar, and perhaps you can assist us. Here on page 76, starting with line 21, you said, for me, I did not say I used to be a military medic. I said I used to be a physician at Battambang Province Hospital because at Battambang everybody knew me that I was a civilian doctor or physician, then a military medic. I had been working as a civilian physician for a long time before I was assigned and given a position as a military medic. This goes on to page 77 for the record. So it would appear that at least on 2 occasions, you've indicated that when you were transferred from the civilian hospital to the military hospital, you went from being a doctor to a medic. Because clearly on both occasions, you don't say you became a military physician. You say you say medic. So, can you please clarify that? Were you a medic?
The President, could you please hold on, Mr. Witness? I would like to hand over to Judge Lavigne.
Oui. Thank you, Mr. President. I think it might be the right time, before we ask the witness to clarify what he says in the English transcription, to be a little bit more accurate about things. And I would like the Ieng Sari defense to tell us at precisely what time these words were spoken that they are referring to. And the second thing is that if there is to be a clarification, it should be made from the Khmer and not from the English. Thank you.
All right, we'll go with the time first. On 6 December, it's after time 14.16.39. And I should say it's immediately before 14.20.47. On the following day, 7 December, when he says medic for the second time, or at least that's what's translated. It's 11.02.30. That is the time. 11.02.30. Where he says physician in the civilian hospital, medic in the military hospital. And there lies the conundrum. Is there a distinction? Maybe the military uses medic for doctor, but I have to go with what I have.
ខ្ញុំសូមនិយាយឲ្យ
Witness, I would like to make it clear once and for all. What is rendered in English as what you stated could not have been the right interpretation of the term I used in Khmer at that time, because I said I was a physician at the civilian hospital, and at the same time when I worked at the military hospital, I was the same physician. At Battambang province, everyone knew me as a civilian physician, then a military doctor or medic, because I worked at the civilian hospital for a long time. And at the military hospital, I worked only briefly. And although I worked at the military hospital, I did not show people that I had any rank. And again, to be precise, I was still a physician, a civilian physician, although working at the military hospital. And perhaps there was some kind of discrepancy in the rendition itself.
All right. Well, again,
The President, Council Kanawaz, do you have any concern regarding the Khmer transcript? And you are guided to refer to Khmer transcript as the basis for your argument, if you may, because it is not entirely appropriate to rely heavily on the English transcript when challenging a witness who spoke originally in Khmer. And it appears to us that you should proceed to another question, which is on another topic rather than on this. If you wish to dwell on this again, then refer to the Khmer transcript, please.
Very well, Mr. President. Just earlier, that is before you had this meeting, to confer, I heard, I don't know what was said in Khmer, but I heard the translators who have been with us for a long period, and we have to rely on them. He said that when he went to the military hospital, he was a doctor or medic. That's what he said today. That's what I heard. Doctor or medic. Now, I'm listening very carefully. So that was my follow-up question, because that's what I'm hearing. Now, maybe they're using the words interchangeably in the booth, but did the gentleman say doctor or medic? Are there two different words in Khmer? Is he using these words? But that's what's being translated, and I have to rely on the translation.
The President, National Council for Mr. Ieng Sari is now instructed to also verify the Khmer version of the testimony to see whether there is any discrepancy in the rendition, and indeed it is justice for the witness as well that we have to serve. Council, Mr. President and Your Honors, we have not ready to prepare this Khmer version, as our case file manager should be the one who helps us with this, but he is at the holding cell. With Mr. President leave, I would like to go down a little bit to see him, because I have problem contacting him through the same time application, and for that I cannot really communicate with him effectively now.
Mr. President, the real issue is today, did the gentleman say doctor or medic? That's what was translated to us. Now, either he's saying this or it's being mistranslated. Either way, this is what I heard, and I'm going on that. So I'm not talking about what happened last week. I'm talking about what happened today. This is what I heard. Now, maybe the gentleman in the booth is using medic interchangeably or in addition to.
The President, we thank you, Council, for your reiteration of the matter, but we believe that there could be even the situation that is, for example, that we need further clarification on the, and we would not wish you to be alone talking about it. We would like to have it clarified, and you may also proceed, but we would like to hand over to the prosecutor first.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, just so the record is complete, I mean, we certainly heard the witness reiterate at least twice that he was also a doctor at the military hospital from 73 to 75, and he said in addition that indeed everybody knew him in the area as a doctor, and he testified last week, of course, that after the arrival of the Khmer Rouge, he couldn't hide his identity because everybody knew him as a doctor and someone who had worked in 2 hospitals. Now, I think it's unfortunate our learned friends don't have the transcript prepared, but in these circumstances, the witness's evidence is clear, and I think we should move on unless counsel can produce a Khmer transcript and point to an inconsistency. We should just move on in the interest of time.
I'll move on, but it still doesn't clear up the matter what he said actually today. Did he say doctor or medic? Did he say it? Because if he didn't say it, then the booth needs to be instructed not to put words into the witness's mouth. If he did say it, then he can explain why he said doctor or medic.
The President, we shall now resume. You may proceed, Counsel.
Thank you. I'll move to another section and then come back to this issue because we're not through with it yet. Now, sir, on Friday, you testified that you wrote this entire book based on your memory. Do you stand by that?
Yes, I do. I maintain my testimony. I wrote this book based solely on my memory.
And that would mean that over the years, you did not read any, you did not rely on any material from the books that you've read to describe events in your book. Is that right?
Yes, it is correct. It is the book, the books I wrote, and it is my personal writing. I did not copy from any other literatures.
All right. Well, did you do any research? Did you go to DC Cam, for instance, and look at any of their archive?
No, I've never been to the DC camp. But after I completed my write-up, I brought 2 books I wrote to the DC camp and 5 additional books to the National Library.
All right. Now, from reading your book, it would appear that you read and perhaps even understand quite well French and English. Is that correct?
Yes, I speak French and little English.
And back then, that is during the period of 75 to 79, you also understood and was able to read English. Is that right? Could you please repeat your answer? We didn't get it.
I could read French well, and I could understand and comprehend reading materials in English.
Well, you discussed that you had, at one time, 2 English books between 1975 to 1979, one being a copy of Tom Sawyer from the great American author Mark Twain, and then there was another book, The World of the Afterlife, written by an American journalist. Were those books in English, or were they in Khmer or French?
As a matter of fact, I did not only read the 2 books when I were working over there. At that times, I took the risk to read those books between 1975 to 1979. Altogether, there was 3 books, one of which was in French, entitled L'Histoire de la Russie, which is the history of Russia. And the second of which was in English, entitled The World Afterlife. As for the book Tom Sawyer, which was the last book of the three I read when I was transferred back to the civilian hospital.
All right. I just want to make sure that you are able to read and understand English and French. Now, you told us on Friday that after 1979, all the way until the time that you began writing your book, which would have been 2004 and thereafter, you read a lot of books about the Khmer Rouge period. And in fact, you told us two. Do you recall making that statement?
Yes, I do. But I did not say that I had read many books. I did say that I read some books concerning the Khmer Rouge, namely the book written by Madame Laurent Pix, which is entitled Beyond the Horizon, and the other one is
the other book.
Prisoner of the Khmer Rouge.
The other book would have been the one written by Prince Norodom Sihanouk, right?
Yes, there was a book written by Samdech Norodom Sihanouk entitled The Prisoner of the Khmer Rouge.
Now, so if we are to understand your testimony, what you're telling us is, over the period from 79 to 2004 and thereafter, the sum total of your reading as an intellectual on this period of 75 to 79 are those two books and those two books only.
During the Khmer Rouge period, I only read the three books.
I'm asking you after. You've told us on numerous occasions that you were and are an intellectual. And I now want to find out exactly how many books you read from 79 to 2004. You claim only two. Is that what you stand by? Those two books and only those two books?
President, witness, please hold on. Mr. Prosecutor, you may proceed.
Well, I think my learned friend is misrepresenting, perhaps inadvertently, the witness's evidence. The witness never testified that he only read two books since 1979. That was in response to a question by Nuon Chea Defense Counsel as to how many books on the Khmer Rouge he had read, and he said those two books after 1979. So I think it's important to present his testimony to him in an accurate manner.
Mr. President, I thought that it was rather obvious that I'm referring to two books concerning this period, not two books in total. Because he's indicated to us that he hasn't been influenced by anything that he's read. So I want to pin down the witness to tell us exactly how many books he read on the KR period.
During the Khmer Rouge era, when I was working at P2 military hospital, I read two books. But those two books were not relevant to the Khmer Rouge regime. But when I returned to P1, which was the civilian hospital, I read another book, Tom Sawyer. And then later on, I also read a book by Madame Laurent Pix and the other book by Prince Norodom Sihanouk. And then later on, I read other books, but I could say that I did not read many books, and I do not recall the titles of those books. And I did not go through the books orally either. But when it was during the Khmer Rouge period, I read every single page of the 3 books I read. But what I would like to emphasize is that the books that I have read did not influence my writing.
Thank you. All right, let's talk about this period of 75 to 79. You've told us and you've written about having a radio. I believe it was a Sony radio. Do you recall writing about that?
I had a small, handy Sony radio, and I took the risk to listen to it at night. I had small earplugs to listen to this radio, and I only listened to it at night.
And can you please tell us the size of this radio back in 1975?
Inaudible for interpreters. The President, witness, please hold on until you see the microphone is activated. Witness. It's about, the radio is about 10 centimeter width and 20 centimeter long. And as for the earplugs, I did not plug with the radio. I had to put it separately somewhere to hide from others.
All right. Now, when you were describing the size, it appeared, at least from your hand movement, that the size was somewhat in the vicinity of a shoebox, that sort of size, or maybe slightly smaller. So help us visualize the size of this radio. Would that be about right? If not, please correct me. It'll become relevant.
The size of this radio is not big. I cover it under a plastic bag, and I use this plastic bag as part of my pillow as well.
All right. Now, you told us about the 3 books that you had. You also describe in your book having a Rolex watch, a rather expensive watch, that you had all the way through 1979. Is that correct?
Yes, I got this Rolex I am wearing now.
And you also talked about possessing gold, because it was gold that you use to purchase batteries for your radio, which you claim was operating all the way until July 1979. So you had gold with you as well in your possession.
As for gold, I actually did not keep it for myself. It belonged to my mother's.
Well, who was hiding it? Who had it physically on them? Your mother, or did you have it? And when you needed gold, you would go to Mom to get the gold.
my mother had the possession of this gold.
And the batteries that you bought for your Sony, where were you able to buy, from whom were you able to buy the batteries?
During the Khmer Rouge era, we had gold, and generally the evacuee had to barter gold with sugar, rice, or battery. And we had to do it secretly at that time.
All right. Now, if you could answer my question. My question is, with whom were you bartering for the batteries? Was he a Khmer Rouge cadre? Was he someone that owned the store prior and managed to have his stock someplace?
I barter it with the other evacuees. We exchange items with them.
So as late as July or June 1977, the evacuees were able to have on them such items as batteries, even though by your own account, you were constantly being searched.
Yes, they were under constant search for any possession, but the bartering process was still available at that time. Secretly, we barter items for other items that we needed.
All right, now you claim that you had a notebook where you took notes, but you destroyed it because you were constantly being searched, and therefore you were afraid. Would you have gotten into trouble for having a radio the size of a shoebox?
Mr. President, just a brief comment, please.
The President, witness, please hold on. And lead co-lawyer for the civil parties, you may proceed.
I beg your pardon, Mr. President. Just a very brief observation. Would my learned colleague be so kind as to observe a pause before he begins his next question, as we have already missed the beginning segments of several answers. Thank you.
Apologies.
President, witness, please respond to the last question posed by the counsel, if you still recall it. Witness, I think I have forgotten the last question posed by counsel Kanavas. If you don't mind, please repeating them.
I'll go step by step. Let me ask you this. Would the radio, if they had discovered the radio that you had, would that have gotten you into trouble?
Yes, I would risk my life if I had been discovered possessing the radio or even read books. But at that time, I was starving for information. I was hungry for reading to get information. That's why I dare take the risk to do so.
And so, by your own account, the books, French and English, would have also gotten you into trouble?
I had to, play some tricks as follows. When I was with the hospital,
I got little time. I don't mean to be rude, but I just want an answer. You can tell us all about the tricks when I get to why you didn't use trickery to maintain your notebooks that you claim you destroyed. For right now, tell us, would the books have gotten you into trouble? Yes or no?
President, witness, please hold on. President, I now hand over to Judge Jean-Marc Lavange to proceed. You may proceed, Judge.
Thank you, President. 3 brief comments. Firstly, the witness has already answered the question that has been posed by Counsel Carnavas. The question is therefore repetitive. Secondly, the Chamber notes that the tone with which Counsel Carnavas is asking his question is entirely inappropriate. Counsel Carnavas has said that he does not wish to be impolite or rude, and the Chamber simply wishes to remind him of this.
Sir, would gold have gotten you into trouble? Could you have lost your life if they had found that you were in possession of gold and using that gold to buy batteries?
Response. I believe that some of the evacuees, not just me myself, had to bring along with them some gold to make sure they could barter for some goods or items if they felt they were much needed.
Now, could you kindly answer my question? I don't think it's repetitive for me to ask you to tell us whether if you had been discovered with gold, that would have gotten you into trouble. It's a rather simple question.
Response. Yes, if they learn that we in the possession of any gold, then we would be taken. The gold would be taken.
And what about the Rolex? Were you wearing the Rolex openly, or did you also have that hidden away with the radio and the books?
Response. In my book, I also wrote something about this. I hidden the Rolex in a plastic bag, several layers of plastic bag, and have it buried underground. By 1979, I had to uncover it.
Yet you tell us that you prepared notes and you were writing notes, but you destroyed them because you feared for your safety. How is it that you had a radio, a fairly large one, 3 books, which also take up some space, the gold you would occasionally get, the batteries you would get from bartering with gold. Okay, the Rolex was buried. But how is it that you now claim that you actually took notes but destroyed them when you were able to hide these rather large items that take up quite a bit of space, keeping in mind that you were traveling quite a bit?
Response. I would like to say this in a more broad terms. For books, I read them at the military hospital because at the military hospital I was given a separate room where I could work alone, and I had to remove the cover pages of the book I read. And after reading a few pages, I would then remove those pages I read and discarded them, or for rolling tobacco. And I made use of the red pages, the pages I read, and offered them to someone to roll the tobacco. And I kept doing this. Having read a few pages, I would then proceed to remove them. And when it comes to the watch, I had to bury it. And for the notes, again, I had to have them destroyed because I was fearing for my safety. I was afraid that it would be found. And at the cooperative, the search was so rigorous, and by the time I got to the cooperative, I couldn't manage to read or to hide anything, but to have them thrown or discarded would be the best option. And I buried the watch and I buried the watch when I was at the cooperative, but I could really hide the radio by blending it with my cushion, because I wrapped it and it looked like a cushion. No one take any notice.
So are we to believe that your room wasn't searched? Because otherwise, if it was searched, they would search also your bed, your pillows. And by your own admission, and this is on page 80 of your book, you say that the last news you got was in July 1977 because you ran out of money to buy batteries. So it would appear that up until July 1977, even though you're moving around, or they're moving you around, you were able to hide this rather large object, yet you were not able to hide your notes.
Response. I would respond to this in two parts. As I indicated, at the provincial hospital, the military hospital indeed, I was given a small a house to me and a separate house. So with this advantage, I could manage to read some books, but I did not really read it in the open, and I had to remove some pages, including the cover pages of the book after finishing reading them. And with regard to the radio, during the time when I was at the hospital and when I became the cattle tender, I had to wrap it in a bag that mixed up with my mosquito net and to make a pillow. And I have a separate hat as well.
Let me move on. From 1979 all the way up until 2004, you made no efforts to try to reconstruct the notes that you had taken. It wasn't, in other words, it wasn't until 25 years later, 2004, that you began writing all the details that are in this book from your memory.
Response. The experience I lived through the Khmer Rouge still lives with me, and I never forget it. So it's just a matter of time. I can recollect every detail of the event.
All right. Well, let me just look at an example here. On page 11 of your book, page 11 in English, in Khmer, it's 00678756-57. Let me repeat that. 00678756-57. My apologies for not having the French. It says here, this is the second paragraph, at 9 a.m., a helicopter landed at the children's park along the bank of the Shankar River. Let me stop here. Did you witness this helicopter landing? And it's a yes or no, please.
Response. On the 17th of April 1975 at 9 a.m., the helicopter landed at the children's playground, and a few people walked past the bridge, the metal bridge, and then board the helicopter and departed.
And did you witness that, or is that what somebody told you? What happened at 9 a.m., that is?
As I stated, I saw this.
Okay, well, it wasn't translated, so my apologies. Now, you've also told us there are some parts in the book where you didn't actually see, but others told you. Is that right?
Response. Could you please be more precise to which part you're referring to here?
Well, let me ask you this. Since you have a rather vivid memory of what happened 25 years ago, could you please tell us, do you recall whether on Thursday or Friday you told us, under oath, that you heard events as opposed to witnessing those events? And those questions were posed both by the prosecution and by the civil parties, and I believe and by the defense. Do you recall saying that?
Response. I may wish to ask you a question because I appear to not understand what you're talking about.
All right. Let me go to page 6, though, of your book. Here you say, page 6, and this would be in Khmer 00369675. Third paragraph in the preface. I am writing what I did, what I saw, what I heard. Now, when you say what I heard, is that what you, are you telling us what you heard from other people? Or are we to believe that your today's testimony is that everything in this book is strictly from your memory and your actual observation, as opposed to what others may have told you?
President, witness, could you please hold on? International Co-Prosecutor, you may now proceed.
Again, I think my learned friend is misrepresenting or misstating, perhaps inadvertently, the evidence. Clearly, last week, the doctor testified extensively, confirmed that some of the events he saw in person, that other events he heard about or learnt about from other people. So I think to be suggesting to him that he is now telling us that he saw every event described in the book is not a fair. It's not fair to the witness, and his testimony should be put to him in a more accurate manner.
Mr. President, I concur with what the prosecution indicated, what the witness stated. Perhaps one point may be that the witness does not have such a good memory since he's not able to recall what he said on Thursday or Friday last week, which goes to his credibility as to what he wrote after 25 years. Also, it might be that the gentleman today has had a change of mind and wishes to change his testimony. Perhaps he feels that he misspoke. That's why I wanted to give him the opportunity. But if the prosecution is confident and we can accept the prosecution's representations that what's in this book is not entirely what the gentleman actually saw and experienced himself, but what was told to him, hearsay, double hearsay, or even triple hearsay, then I'm perfectly willing to move on.
The President, Co-Prosecutor, you may proceed.
Your Honours, I apologise for taking up time again, and I'm only on my feet because my learned friend was inviting us to make certain concessions. The proper way to proceed is to distinguish between the accounts which a witness saw with his own eyes and other accounts he learnt about in other ways. Clearly, the evidence needs to be treated for what it is, each account on its own strength and on the witness's observations. I think the witness has been more than clear as to which events he witnessed personally and what the sources of other events that he has described were. And of course, we'll be making those representations in due course in our final submissions.
Let me ask my next question, Mr. President. Sir, you told us last week that you had no real freedom of movement. Do you stand by that?
Response. Yes, I do. It is true. I did not have the freedom to move, and the other people had the same problem.
And in the preface on the same page that I referred to earlier, you indicate that the book only covers Battambang in two districts. Is that because that was the extent of your universe during that period, from 1975 to 79? That was the range of movement that you would have had.
Response. During the Khmer regime, I worked in 2 hospitals in the provincial town and also at a district hospital in Don Tiêu district, which is now renamed as Aik Phnom district. I also worked in Mong Risai district. These are the confined areas I moved to and I could write about.
Now, nowhere in your book do I see, and nowhere in your testimony did I hear from last week, where you attended any meetings of a high level where policy decisions may have been discussed. Am I correct?
Response. I was a doctor who was asked to work at a district hospital and at the sector hospital, at the P2 hospital and P1 civilian hospital. When I worked there, I believe that interpreter may have misstated my position. I didn't work as a senior doctor at the hospital. I was more or less working in my capacity as a political prisoner at the hospital or a very simple employee or medical staff among the other Khmer Rouge medics at that time. So I did not hold any senior or significant position as a doctor at that time.
All right. Well, it seems, at least from what we're hearing today, and I think you allude to it in your book a little bit, that from 75 to 79, you actually did not work in the same capacity as you had worked before. In other words, you were not treated as a doctor. You were there as an assistant. You might have been in the hospital, but you were not necessarily viewed as a doctor. Is that what we are to understand?
The President, Mr. Witness, hold on. You now proceed. Response. Yes, it is correct. But I wish to also add that I was asked to help others as an assistant, and at the same time I was a prisoner and a subordinate, a low-level employee.
Right. And if I understand what you told us today and what you're saying right now, is that you were not invited to any meetings where significant issues or matters or policies were being discussed. Is that right?
Response. Yes, it is correct. I, as indicated, was called to assist other people, and then I was at the same time a prisoner and low-level worker.
Right. And so today, as you are testifying, you're not in a position to tell us what the policies were or were not or might have been during that period. You're able to recount what you remembered, what you experienced, but as far as actual policies, you're not in a position to tell us, are you?
Response. No, I'm not.
Thank you. Now let me move on a little bit to 1979. In the last page of your book, it's 145 in English, and in Khmer the section would be in 00678941 to 42. You state the following: I was director of Battambang Hospital from 1979 to 1986, and director of Battambang Provincial Health from 1986 to 1992. I take it you stand by what you wrote.
Response. Yes, I do. After the fall of the Khmer Rouge, I worked at the Battambang Provincial Hospital as the head of the hospital until 1986, when I was then promoted as the head of the health section or unit of the hospital until 1992. And then I was transferred to the Ministry of Health.
Okay, thank you. Now, it would appear, or help me out here if I'm correct, you would have been appointed to those positions by the new regime and or by the Vietnamese who were at the time running the country, as you seem to allude to in your book. Is that right?
Response. I was appointed by the government of Cambodia, not by the Vietnamese.
All right. But you do recall in your book how you describe, all the way until, I believe, 89, how the Vietnamese were controlling the situation in Cambodia.
Response. It was not unusual that there were some Vietnamese experts at some ministry.
All right. Now, was it because of your position and or the Vietnamese or the Cambodian government that you say in your book, and I don't mean to go into details, but you say in your book that in 1986, 6 or 7 years after the fall of Phnom Penh to the Vietnamese, that you're sent to Vietnam for a 6-month brainwashing session. Whose decision was it? Was it the Cambodian government's or was it the Vietnamese government's?
The President. Witness, please hold on, and Mr. Co-Prosecutor, you may now proceed.
Your Honours, we didn't object initially because we want to give counsel a fair opportunity to demonstrate some relevance. But on this particular issue, you've already ruled that the purpose and content of the sessions in Vietnam are beyond the scope and not relevant, particularly given that the witness has confirmed that they've had no impact on his recollection and his book. So we object to this question.
Well, just so I can be heard on the matter, we do think it's relevant because he's demonstrated to us that he has no notes. He had destroyed them. He writes the book 25 years after. He's installed in a fairly high position by the then government that was working with Vietnam. 7 years after the event, he goes by his own admission to a 6-month brainwashing session in Vietnam. And the whole purpose of brainwashing is so that one who's being brainwashed would actually not know or be in a position to describe and to be aware of the extent of the brainwashing. And we would maintain that perhaps some of what he recounts 25 years later may be colored by what he's learned and what he's experienced subsequent to the events. So that's why we asked the question. If I'm not permitted to explore this issue, then I'll move on. But I would like a ruling.
The President. The objection is sustained. The Chamber already ruled on this on Friday last week.
Thank you, Mr. President. My position was slightly nuanced, but I accept the ruling. Well, but sticking with the Vietnamese, because I do think this is relevant and wasn't covered. If you look on page 114, which is Khmer 06628900, you state as follows, and now we're talking immediately around January 6, 1979, so we're still in the temporal period. You state, that the following day, Phnom Penh Radio announced the new names of the country, People's Republic of Kampuchea, in an agreement treaty of 25 years with the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. A vague, skeptical feeling ravaged my mind. Are Cambodian people trapped again in another similar situation like this saying, between the crocodile in the river and the tiger on the land? Another communist regime led by the same communist group and backed by a communist country that had used to swallow Cambodia's territory is coming to replace the Khmer Rouge communist regime. Actually, the situation of Cambodia under the Khmer Rouge is too ripe for Vietnam. If there was not for the so-called Khmer United Front, Vietnam would have set up another Khmer Front to be used as a pretext for entering Cambodia and overthrowing this evil democratic Kampuchea and create a new Cambodian government controlled by Vietnam. The appearance could be different, but the essence are the same and even more disastrous. Does Ho Chi Minh's long-term vision over Cambodia has come true? What's Cambodia going to be? What is the future of our children, grandchildren, and our future generation? What are the meanings of the 25-year agreement treaty since it was signed between, quote, helpers, unquote, and the persons who had, quote, begged, unquote, for their help? Do you recall writing this passage?
Response: yes, I do.
All right, now if we could dwell on this just for a few moments, because I don't want you to discuss what happened after 79, such as in places like K5 and what have you, but rather I want you to reflect on what you wrote, because it would appear that here you're asking rhetorically about Ho Chi Minh's long-term vision of Cambodia, and you're talking about Vietnam swallowing parts of Cambodia. Now, can you please explain that, why you had this feeling that was ravaging your mind just as you were being liberated?
Response: I believe that it is not uncommon that a country that is assisted by foreigners who help overthrow a regime. So the helper had some kind of clear objective. And as I stated in the book, the Khmer Rouge had conflicts with Vietnam. But during the time of conflict, the Khmer Rouge killed their own people instead of killing the enemies. So I also wrote in the book that who did not love Cambodia, who at the same time did not pray for the end of the Khmer Rouge.
Thank you. Now, if you could focus on...
The President, Council, could you advise the Chamber as to how much time you would need to put questions to this witness, please?
Your Honor, I think if I can manage within the next 5 to, well, I would say 7 to 10 minutes. If I can get through this line of questioning with the gentleman, I believe I can sit down having completed my examination. But I do need to explore just a few more questions on this particular issue raised.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now, let me go back because I'm using your own words. You're talking about led by the same communist group and backed by a communist country that had used to swallow Cambodians' territory. Was it your belief then, back in January 1979, that the Vietnamese had swallowed Cambodian territory in the past?
President, a witness, please hold on. And Mr. Prosecutor, you may proceed.
Your Honours, we would object on the basis of relevance. What views the witness held about the history of Cambodia and the history of Vietnam on the 6th of January 1979 bears no relevance to the issues before you. It has no legitimate exculpatory purpose. We've held off objecting in the hope that counsel might go towards something more relevant, but these questions are clearly not relevant and do not in any way elicit evidence that might assist Your Honours in finding the truth.
Let me be heard. Let me pause first. Let me pause for the French. So let me be heard why this is relevant. The prosecutor, and perhaps even the UN, would like us to believe that something magically happened on the 17th of April, 75, and something magically happened on the 6th of January, 1979, and nothing happened before or after. Now, I'm not interested in the after, although I would say it is pertinent for historical context, but perhaps the powers that set up this establishment would not want to go into that. Be that as it may, the issue has been and will be and continues to be throughout this trial that there was this fear of the Vietnamese from the very inception of 1975 of the Khmer Rouge regime, and even before that there was fear what the Vietnamese were attempting to do. Now, this gentleman is not a Khmer Rouge cadre. He tells us he hasn't been brainwashed. Yet he writes a book, and he talks about Ho Chi Minh's long-term plan. He writes a book where he talks about Vietnam's past swallowing of Cambodia. And so when we are going into issues that are dealing with Vietnam's involvement or the fears of the Khmer Rouge regime towards Vietnam and the events that occur, we have to look at it in a historical context. So if the average person recognizes that there was this inherent historical fear, then why is it not relevant for the defense to raise it? Why is it then that the Khmer Rouge regime was somehow making this fantasy about Vietnam wanting to swallow up or having territorial ambitions in Cambodia? I think it is relevant. It's a matter of one or two questions. You may decide what, if anything, to do with it. But to suggest that we can somehow try this case in a vacuum is illogical.
The President, the objection and the grounds for objection by the prosecutor is appropriate and thus sustained. So the counsel is now instructed to move on.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before I move on or sit down, I do wish to have a clarification from the trial chamber. Is it your decision that the prosecution can talk about evidence with the Vietnamese, but the defense is not permitted to go into those areas. Because if that is the case, one, aside from there being a double standard, it clearly shows that the defense is not permitted to make a proper record in order to then argue the facts and the evidence in the proper historical context. So I would like a ruling. Is this ruling just on this gentleman, or is this a ruling that bars from now on and forever until the trial is over the defense from going into any areas dealing with Vietnam, their behavior before, during, and after the killings that they committed, the suspicions that everyone, all ordinary citizens, had about Vietnam, which also would reflect the suspicions that the Khmer Rouge had and acted upon. So I need a clear ruling, Your Honor, and after that, I'm prepared to sit down.
President, the issue has already been ruled upon, and the grounds for this objection is based on the specificity of each question posed by parties, and the Chamber is of the opinion that the witness before us now is not an expert witness. He is not a historian. The determination to summon this witness to testify before the Chamber is to hear his experience, what he has come across in relation to the administrative structure of the Khmer Rouge regime, as well as the initial phases of population movement. And if you refer to the initial determination of the hearings of the witness, the counsel should look into the instruction advised by the Chamber. So this issue is ruled upon, and the question posed by parties, and once there is any objection to this question, the Chambers will rule from time to time based on the specificity and relevance of the question.
Thank you, Mr. President. But before I sit down, I must comment for the record that when the prosecution was asking questions, they went into other areas and treated him like a witness. But with that,
the matter has been ruled upon, and the time is now appropriate for adjournment, and the hearing of the testimony of this witness has come to an end as well. Mr. Hun Chun Lee, your testimony before the Chamber has now come to an end, and we do not need your testimony anymore, but we would like to take this opportunity to thank you very much for taking your time to testify before the Chamber, and you may now return to your home or anywhere which you would like to go, and the court officer is instructed to coordinate the return of this witness to his home. Mr. Hun Chun Lee, you are now released. You can go back home. And after coming back from the break, the Chamber will hear another witness, TCW 307, and the court is now adjourned for 20 minutes, and we will resume at 11.
សូមអញ្ជើញក្រោកឈរ